Well, greetings. My name is William Utech. I'm the mission executive for our Minnesota South District. I'm here with our friend and colleague in ministry, Pastor Vue Lee from King of Kings Lutheran Church. Vue, tell us how long you've been there.
I've been at King of Kings for about 11 years now.
11 years now.
Yep, since I moved to Minnesota in 2008, and I started worshiping there about 2010. So this is 2021, so about 11 years.
All right. So your history, your background, how is it that you came to be where you are right now?
That's a long story.
Long story.
That's a long story. I grew up in California.
All right.
And I wasn't a Christian, when we came here to the U.S. When we came here, I was 3 years old. And we were actually sponsored by a Lutheran church in Wisconsin. So I lived in Wisconsin for 1 year. I lived in St. Paul for 1 year, and then we moved out to California in 81. And I'd kind of been out there ever since until 2008, until our family moved here. But I wasn't baptized until I was 23. And then 10 years later, I felt the calling to go into the ministry. And then that was 2008 when we moved here. So that's how I end up here in Minnesota from California. So
tell us about the ministry that you're currently involved in.
The ministry I'm currently involved in, when we started the ministry, and specifically the Hmong ministry over at King of Kings, I came here as a student because I never went to college. So I had to do my undergrad at Concordia St. Paul. And then, the plan was 4 years here, then maybe 4 years in Fort Wayne or St. Louis. That was the original plan. And I'm an older guy, so to my wife, I said, well, since I'm here studying, we should should at least talk to people about Jesus. That's the whole point of the ministry.
Right.
And we started a Bible study in the basement of the family dorm that we were living in, and it kind of just grew from there. And then we got recommended to King of Kings to see if we can start worshiping there. And then we started worshiping, and then when it was time for me to graduate from CSP, my wife and I had a dilemma. Well, what do we do with this ministry? If we leave, most likely it's just going to dissolve or disperse. And so we prayed on it and said, what should we do? And a week later, we came back, and we both came to the same conclusion that we should stay and study through the EIIT program, long distance instead. And that's how we ended up at King of Kings. And when I got done with my program, then there was another dilemma. Where do I get the call? And by that time, King of Kings says, well, we've been wanting a associate pastor anyways, so why don't you come on board? So now I serve there full-time as an associate pastor with Pastor Steve Bielenberg.
Excellent.
Yeah, so that's how I end up here in Minnesota, also at King of Kings.
And so the group that you and your wife kind of formed while you were still doing undergrad, right? Was that group made up of primarily other Hmong folks, or was it a mixed bag of ethnicities?
Primarily just Hmong.
Okay.
Just people that we had contact with other people, and out of that group, 2 of them used to be shamans.
Okay. All right.
And so that's kind of a big deal where they used to be shamans, and they no longer could appeal to what they call their shaman spirits, and the only way to get out is to become a Christian.
All right. So you must have seen some pretty cool baptisms happen.
Yes. Yeah, we some real good baptism. When you baptize a ex-shaman, you have only the pastor is allowed to go and tear down their shaman altar.
Okay.
And then you have to get rid of all the spiritual paraphernalia, and you have to get rid of it out of the house.
All right.
And then you replace that altar with a cross.
And you get to be a part of all that.
You got to be part of all that. And those people are still worshiping today.
That's great. That's pretty cool. That's a great story. You have been in the United States most of your life.
Most of my life, yes.
Yeah, so,
came here when I was 3.
Yeah, and so you've experienced Wisconsin, Minnesota, California, and then back to Minnesota, and now you're part of the Minnesota South District of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, and you've been hanging out with us for a while.
Good time.
Yeah. From your perspective, as a leader in the Hmong community, as a Hmong pastor, what is the hardest thing about being a non-Anglo in a predominantly Anglo church body?
That's a good question. Personally, because I grew up here at such a young age, living in, having my feet in both worlds. I can speak Hmong, I can speak English. I can juggle in between the two. Personally, I've not had any of my own challenges or struggles. But I do realize that there are challenges out there.
Mm-hmm.
That there are challenges when it comes to people gravitating towards things that they're comfortable, or gravitating towards people that looks like them. So it's not just a Anglo thing. It's an African thing. It's an Asian thing. It's a Latino thing. We gravitate towards things that we are familiar with.
Sure.
And so, because I know that and I realize that, then the things that I do, I'm conscious of it, and some of the decisions I've made are intentional to make sure that I don't fall into that.
Okay. All right. So you've, like the rest of us who live here, you saw some pretty bitter racial and ethnic divides kind of boil to the surface this past summer. What is your perspective on all of that friction that we're experiencing here in the metro area between ethnicities and between races?
There's a long history, not just in America, but if you look at history around the world, there's always been some sort of tension, discrimination, and sometimes the things that we do may be unconscious bias. May not be racially motivated to be negative, but unconscious bias. When I think about what's going on here in America, and then I think about there are Hmong people who are in, let's say, in Laos or Thailand, who are the minority, who are being discriminated against.
Okay.
And so that this, it's not white and black, or these are Asians against Asians. You look at it, and it's always the majority and the minority. There's always going to be that tension, whether it's color, whether it's the rich or the poor. And I think we've always had that since the beginning.
Yes.
Of the world, and to me, the only solution to that is the gospel.
Right. Yeah. So for good and a lot of times for ill, majority cultures behave like majority cultures, and they kind of exercise their will
Yes.
on minority cultures, and that happens the world over. And like you say, there's that can be very sinful, that can be very evil, and there's only one remedy for that.
Yes, from a Christian perspective, there's only one remedy for that,
And that's that's our Savior Jesus.
yes.
Right?
But we also have to realize that even in the church, because we're Christians, but even in the church, we still have those same frictions too.
Sure.
And so we're all flawed in that way. Even in the church, even if the gospel is the answer, we're still flawed in that way.
So how do you how do you perceive our relationships with each other, even though we're different? There's still a majority culture in,
Yes.
in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
Yes.
Undeniably so. I mean, we're still 95% white.
Yes.
How do you perceive those relationships in your own church body? What have you experienced?
I think if I wanted the easy way out, I would go be a pastor for a dominant, Asian or Hmong denomination.
Okay.
But why do I choose to stay in the LCMS when it's a predominantly, Anglo white, church body? I think part of my job is to help people, understand each other. I think part of my job is to be able to help people love one another, whether they look different or not. We want to be the church of God, all tribes and nation and language. And so who would I be if I took the easy way out? And so you got to have this understanding of one another, because even if we have our unconscious bias, once we realize that, then when we love through the cross, then we're all the same.
We're all the same.
So, but we have to love through the cross.
So, speaking as a pastor, and King of Kings Lutheran Church is one of those churches in our district where there is a white pastor and a non-white pastor,
and we're very proud of that.
And tell me what that's like from your perspective.
When we started the Hmong ministry there, originally, I came as a Hmong pastor, but as I've grown and as I've studied, my perspective on that has kind of changed. So yes, I speak Hmong and we have a Hmong ministry, but I'm not just here for the Hmong people. I'm here for all nations. So it doesn't matter who you are. You're going to get the gospel from me. You're going to, you receive God's love. And so my vision has changed to more of a multicultural, multi-ethnicity type of church. Now, is King of Kings ready for that? Well, I think intentionally, I have prepared them for that. Since the beginning, they didn't know that, but now they probably won't know now. But since the beginning, when we planted the Hmong ministry there, I've looked at a lot of ethnic ministry, and I said, well, a lot of times ethnic ministry will go in and rent a building, or we'll go in and be a separate congregation. And I said, maybe we won't do that this time. This Hmong ministry will be a third service in a different language, but the rights and responsibilities of King of Kings as a member, not a separate entity. And then on top of that, the Hmong members should be on committees, should be on boards, should have all the responsibility as anybody else.
So that's the way it's worked out for you all there.
That's the way it's worked out.
And how has that gone? I mean, tell me about that process. I mean, because it was new for everybody.
Yes. I think when we first started, before the Hmong ministry went to King of Kings, there was an African ministry there.
Okay.
And the African ministry eventually left. And so I know there was some history there. And so going in, I said, well, we have to change the model. The model can't be the same. Because if the model is the same, then it might not work out. So change the model. Everybody's a member. Everybody has the same responsibilities of that. But on top of that, myself intentionally, I insert myself in roles and in positions of influence to say, well, we are one. And a lot of people at the beginning, when we first started the ministry, thought that we were a separate entity. And so we had to continuously say, no, we are one. We are one. And by doing that, people start to understand. And not only that, but I didn't just serve in the Hmong ministry, in the Hmong congregation, in the Hmong service. I made sure that I went to the Anglo service, and I served in the Anglo service. And even as a deacon, I serve and I preach in the liturgy. Uh-huh. And so the more they saw me around, the more they accepted me, the more they laughed at my jokes and and all these different things that that it's not an assimilation. We have to understand that it's an integration.
Okay.
And sometimes we get those two mixed up.
Yeah. And integration is the way to go.
Yeah.
All right. So how long did it take? How long did it take for that for your congregation to kind of just get used to the idea that what we're doing together in a multi-ethnic way is the way to do it?
At least 2 years.
At least 2 years.
At least 2 years of constantly having potluck and combined services. Every 2-3 months we will have a combined service where we all came together. And it's just every 2-3 months have a combined service. I got to show up at all 3 services, and have potlucks and do as many things together as possible so that eventually there was no more difference.
Okay. That sharing food together is a really valuable thing, isn't it?
They love the egg rolls. That's the thing they always ask.
Everybody
Are you
loves
guys
the egg roll, yeah.
Are you guys gonna bring egg rolls? Of course.
Of course we're going to bring egg rolls.
Yeah, I always say, are you gonna bring?
Egg rolls,
I'm like,
yeah.
are you gonna bring your Jello?
So, what do you wish more Lutheran Church Missouri Synod congregations understood about, the diversity that's part of our world today, and how they should be a Christian congregation in that in the new social realities that we are in? What would you like more congregations to know about that, or to do about that?
If we look at the history even of our nations, we were a nation of immigrants. Originally predominantly, European, immigrants, different tribes and different clans. But as more nations and more different people are coming to the U.S., we just have to know the fact that things are changing, whether we like it or not. And it's always those who have influence sometimes don't like to lose influence. But we know that if we work together for the betterness of the gospel or the kingdom, that's our ultimate goal. Our ultimate goal is not to lose influence or power, but our ultimate goal is to be able to use the gospel in a way that's going to change the world. And that has to start with us personally.
So we have to have our eyes on the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and remember that it is the gospel that makes us really brothers.
It is.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't a Christian, but somebody shared it with me when I was young. And obviously I didn't convert right away, but over the years, from when I was 5, 4, 3, all the way until I was 23 and baptized. Along the way, the gospel was shared with me throughout my life. I didn't realize it until the day I was baptized. And then I look back and says, oh, that's what those Christians were doing. I didn't realize it until now that I'm a Christian. Then, now I knew why they were doing all those different things. And so when you look at ministry and, especially even ethnic ministry, how hard is it? It's hard, especially for a lot of ethnic pastors. A lot of them have a full-time job because their congregation can't pay the full-time because of economic reasons. Immigrants don't make a lot of money, and they don't make a lot of money. Then they can pay the pastor a lot of money. So the pastor has to work too. Myself, I'm fortunate enough that King was able to call me full-time, and so I get full salary, full benefit as if I'm just I would say an Anglo pastor. But that's my situation. But if that wasn't the case, I would probably be working at a job right now, and I wouldn't be able to be here to talk to you, unless I take a vacation day.
Right.
And that's kind of the hard part about ethnic ministry. But for me, now as a Christian, you think about it and you say, well, how do we continue to share the gospel even with those who don't look like us? And if I were to say, well, William shared the gospel with someone who don't look like you, well, if I turn that word around to myself, well, how do I share the gospel with someone that doesn't look like me? Well, then I would be sharing with you. Yeah. And so to me, in my eyes, there's no dominant culture, or there's no dominant, people. And to me, as everybody is a child of God, and they deserve to hear, the gospel. And those people who share the gospel with me, they don't know where I am. They have no idea. They have no idea where that 5-year-old, 6-year-old kid is.
Right.
So how do you measure?
But they did it anyhow.
Yeah. So how do you measure success? You can't. Sometimes you can.
Sometimes you can't.
Mm-hmm.
I hope and pray some of them got to see it turn out to be a pastor.
Yeah.
So that leads very well to another question. If you could change one thing about our district, about our church body, if you change one thing, snap your fingers and it would be different, what would you change?
That's a dangerous question.
No.
I mean, if we're talking about this subject and what can we change, I have to go back on my own personal experience and we have to be intentional about how we work together as brothers and sisters. If we have people who, we have these unconscious bias, but if we have people who may look more like us and we might gravitate more toward, then how do we help each other to be of a power of influence in a way? If I see a picture of the Missouri Synod and they don't look like me, I might have to go, my unconscious bias will take me to another denomination where people are going to look like me. Unless you know that those things exist and you have a different purpose as well. People may not look like me, but I want to be able to help them understand so that we can understand each other. And like I said, I've grown in both worlds where I can jump back and forth, and I can help you understand someone that's like me, but I can help someone that's Hmong understand you.
Me better. Yeah, sure.
And sometimes there's language barriers, there's cultural barriers, but I'm fortunate enough that I can help with those barriers because I've been in both worlds. Right. But someone that has not is going to struggle with that.
So, what would you like your church to ultimately look like in the next generation?
My goal is to have a multicultural church. People from all tribes and different languages and nations, and obviously we live here in the U.S., so we're going to speak English, but I want people from all different nations together.
In your congregation,
yes.
In our congregations, red and yellow, black and white. All right.
That's my vision. That's what I would like to see.
Okay. How can the people of the Minnesota South District best support you in reaching that goal?
That's a good one. I think if we're talking about being more understanding of each other, talking about being more loving towards one another, then this words comes out a lot of times, but we just have to be diverse. I mean, we have to be intentional of being diverse, and it's okay to have someone like me be a senior pastor at a predominantly Anglo church, and that should be okay. I don't have that challenge, but I know people have that challenge. My job is to help them overcome those challenges.
Sure.
Because I understand. My job is to help those people that have those challenges come to that realization. And so even if we have people are in different denominations, some churches have done that very well. Can we do that?
Can we do that?
And that first starts with us being able to open our hearts to even the possibility of that. Just a possibility. Just crack that door open, and the rest of us will push in. But that door has to be cracked open.
Sure. Sure. Well, thanks for sharing your experience, your faith, and your heart with us. And we hope and we pray that your vision for our church body comes to fruition.
Me too. And I pray that's your visions as well.
Excellent.
All right.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks for having me here.